And I'm so excited to have you here as we embark on this 12-month journey together. So if you ever wondered how to extend the quality of your life, and we're not talking here about the number of years, but the number of good, healthy years, then this podcast is for you. Because longevity without vitality is not the goal. We're going to explore powerful science-backed strategies to help us thrive, not just survive, through the years ahead. Let me start with a personal story. So my family history is riddled with some of the most common chronic diseases. We have type 2 diabetes, dementia, stroke, heart disease, and unfortunately also bowel cancer. And I have watched loved ones suffer, and sadly I've also lost several cousins in their 30s, 40s and 50s to what is largely preventable illnesses. In fact, most of chronic illnesses are largely preventable. But for years I've known that I have these genetic risk factors, and this is what's really important to understand. Having the genes for a disease does not mean that you will develop it. And this is where epigenetics comes in. So epigenetics is the study of how our environment and our lifestyle shapes and influences the way our genes are expressed. So it's not just about the DNA that you inherit. It's very much about how you interact with it. What you eat, how you sleep, the amount of stress in your life, the exercise that you do, all of this will determine whether those risky genes switch on or not, or off. I always think of it like, you could inherit a lot of money and then squander it away. Or you could be born into circumstances of poverty, but be able to build up wealth. And it's the same way with our genes. They do give us sometimes a head start in life and sometimes a little bit of a hindrance in life as well. But there is so much control that we have. So I know that I carry these genetic risks, but I also carry control, and so do you. So we do need to know our risks. And it's not so that you can live in fear, but so that you know where to put your attention, because we absolutely can break free of our genetic predispositions to living well and living longer. Many of my patients are coming and say, look, I don't want to live longer if it means I'm going to be living in poor health. And I completely get it, because who wants to spend their last decades frail, dependent, and battling chronic illness? So in the early 1900s, life expectancy was just under 50. But then people at that time died quickly from infections, accidents, or childbirth. And this is what we call fast causes of death. But modern medicine has changed all of that. We now live much longer, but many of us spend those extra years slowly dying. So suffering from diseases like heart disease, cancer, dementia, or even just difficulty with mobility. And that's why I'm not just chasing lifespan, I'm chasing health span. So this is the number of years that we live in good health, in full vitality, and without chronic disease weighing us down. And here's the good news. Health span is malleable. Research shows that we have far more control over aging and disease than we once thought. And through lifestyle, we can slow down and even reverse biological aging. So modern medicine has thrown trillions of pounds into diseases like dementia and cancer, but hardly budging our progress in terms of prevention or preventing these illnesses. The reason is we are intervening at the wrong time. Disease processes often set in motion decades before the symptoms appear. And when someone suddenly dies from a heart attack, it wasn't sudden at all. It was years in the making. So, for example, to explain kind of the process, if you go to your doctor and they test something called HbA1c, which tells us a little bit about how you process glucose, and that marker comes back borderline, you'll often be told, well, let's wait and see, it's borderline. And then a few years later, you go back for a test, and now you're told you have type 2 diabetes. What we know is that insulin levels are often raised more than a decade before that HbA1c rises. And during that time, we know that raised glucose actually already causes massive damage to the blood vessels. So we've missed a very crucial window in which we could have fully prevented a condition from developing, and not just diabetes. We're talking about damage to blood vessels, because remember, these things go hand in hand. You develop one chronic condition and it can lead to another. So unfortunately, medicine can be so binary. You either have a disease or you don't. But health doesn't work that way. There's a whole spectrum, and there's a whole kind of lead up that happens to the development of chronic disease. So by taking full control of your health, you could potentially increase your lifespan by about 10 years and your health span by about 20. And what I mean by that is that we're not just extending the numbers at the end. We're actually extending the number of years that you live in good health. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just going to be talking about what research shows, as well as my 20 years of clinical practice and what I've learned through that. There's a great quote by JFK that said, "The time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining." So very often, when we're in our 40s and 50s, we're not really thinking about our 70s and 80s, are we? We're not really thinking about what our health is going to be like in those years. And yet, this is the time where we really need to be focusing on setting the groundwork and the foundations for our health. For our health in our 70s and 80s. So think of it like an iceberg. The visible part above the water is representing the diseases we diagnose, but underneath the surface, years of damage have already taken place before symptoms appear. So the good news is you can change your trajectory. You are not a passenger in your own health. You are the captain of your vessel. And this concept was beautifully explained by Dr. Peter Attia, a leading Healthspan expert. And I couldn't agree more. So 15 years ago, I had this patient walk into my office. He's 80 years old, and he comes in and he says, I'm starting to see my memory slip a little bit. I'm a little stiffer. My mobility is challenged. And I just kind of feel like I'm on a bit of a decline. And he says, I've just been to my GP, and my GP said, well, what do you expect? You're 80. And he says, but, I'm still working. He was a consultant at the time. He said, I'm still working. I want to keep my brain sharp. I know that I might only be around for another 10 years, but I really want those years to be the best that I can. So we went through a whole process, did a bunch of testing. We started optimizing everything that we could. We worked together for 14 years. And sadly, my patient passed away at 94. When I went to the funeral and spoke to family members, I was told that he'd had a lovely day. He'd been out to watch a show at the Edinburgh Fringe and had come home and was sitting in a chair having a glass of champagne when he passed away. And that really for me was kind of summed up how life should be. We really should be able to live it right to the end. In this case, he was very proactive, engaged, and very committed to making small changes. And it definitely did pay off in the long run. So Healthspan is not just about extending the timeline. It's ensuring that every extra year you have is a good one. And that's why I do the work that I do. It's why I care so deeply about health span over lifespan, because I've seen what's possible when we do take control of our own health journey. So this year, I decided to put myself to the test, literally. I ran a comprehensive assessment of my own biological age. And while I hoped for glowing results, the truth is they weren't as stellar as I had expected. So despite all my knowledge and experience, my biological age came back only a few years younger than my chronological age. But here's the thing. It's not a setback, it's an opportunity. This year, I'm diving even deeper into the research. I'm planning to move more, eliminate processed foods, take a closer look at my habits, the good and the bad and the ones that I need to build. But I'm also exploring the psychology of change. How do we move from knowing what we need to do to actually doing it? Because if we're honest, that's where most of us struggle. We often know what's good for us, but building these habits, sticking to them is where the real work lies. And I'll be sharing that journey with you too. So the ups, the downs, and the discoveries along the way. But I do want to leave you with this thought. The goal isn't just to live longer. It's to live better and to wake up each day with energy and purpose and joy. So thank you so much for tuning into this first episode. I hope it's inspired you to think differently about aging and what's possible for your future. Over the next few episodes, we'll dive into lots of different things, nutrition, exercise, but until then, take care of yourself and start thinking about what small steps you can take today to invest in your health span.